Hey, eighth graders. Happy Friday. Mr. Slaby here talking about setting like a writer, not just a student trying to get their work done. So we want to push you a little bit. Okay, so let's dive right in, right? Um, hope you're all well, and I hope you're thinking about this story. It's already cooking up in your brain. But basically, as a writer, you got to understand that you're moving towards like the craft of writing, right? Anyone can, do a basic setting, but we want to push you a little bit. So the focus here is if you're trying to write the setting of your character, establish or the character setting of your story, you're trying to establish where you are, when you are, who's there, and what's going on. That's the basics. Now, different writers do that differently, but ultimately, we got to know who is populating the setting. When we read the beginning of a story, it tells us who's involved. It tells us whether we're following the character, like it's the I perspective, or whether it's the them or they. That's third person perspective or point of view. Second person POV, not that common. Those choose your own adventures. You hear like you a lot, where the reader is the character. No, the I in first or they in third is kind of where we're talking. All right, what does this setting look like, sound like, and feel like? Good writers don't just say, don't just necessarily tell you what it is. They kind of find ways to show you what it is, right? So they don't say like there are lots of trees that have rustling leaves. They might just say the rustle of leaves, and that tells you, oh, there's trees around. So sometimes it's just showing you what something sounds like, shows you also what it looks like. Remember where the story takes place. That's what most people think of when they think like, oh, yeah, I think, like that's setting is where is it, right? And that's the thing is we know your setting is going to be your country, your adopted country. We know that already. But is it in the big city in that country? Is it in a small town? Is it in a suburb? Is it in the rural area? Or is it in the city that's really hyper populated? And also, is it consistent with our world, right? So here's the thing: if there's a great show on HBO called Watchmen, where the whole idea of the story is that the presidents weren't elected in the same way. So Richard Nixon is never he's never kicked out of office. He actually stays as president, and things change. And it's still America with streets and people, and there's still presidents, but the laws shift because the different voting, the different election outcomes have shaped history differently. So it's a different version of America, but it's still America. That's part of what happens there. And lastly, when does the story take place? You decide whether this is past, present, or future, and that's important. I mean, how you say that is what the writing comes in. So let's take a look at an example. It's pretty obvious. All right, so this is a narrator in the Twilight Zone episode that we watched, right? So the camera has begun to pan down until it passes the horizon and on a sign which reads Maple Street. So they tell us where we are. Boom. All right, pan down until we are shooting down at a very typical, or shooting down at an angle toward the street below. It's a tree-lined, quiet residential American street, very typical of the small town. Boom! Right? That's just telling us where we are. The houses have front porches on which people sit and swing on gliders, conversing across from the house. So there we have what we see and what we hear. So the houses have front porches on which people sit and swing. That's those benches that swing. And then conversing. That's about hearing people talk. This just keeps going, right? A good humor man rides a bicycle and is just in the process of stopping to sell some ice cream. All right. We see an ice cream person. That's a big deal. I love this one. This tells you it's 1959 and we have a very male dominated society. So two women gossip on the front lawn. That's what women do. Yeah, this is a little behind the times and a little bit condescending. All right, Maple Street, USA, this tree-lined little world of front porch gliders, the laughter of children. Man, we're in a nice place. That's all done by sight and sound. All right, let's take a look at Hunger Games real quick. So this book, great book, super fun to read. Let's read the first paragraph. When I wake up, the other side of the bed is cold. My fingers stretch out, seeking Prim's warmth, but finding only the rough canvas cover of the mattress. She must have had bad dreams and climbed in with our mother. Of course she did. This is the day of the reaping. Again, I talked up here about like who's populating. Okay, we know Katniss is her name, but we don't know that yet. Well, we know our speaker. We know Prim is someone there. She references mother, so we're like, oh, it's got to be her sister. So now we have three people that we know about, and we know it's cold. right? We know that they're sharing a bed. So it's not, it doesn't sound like the nicest place. They're not in a hotel room. It says rough, not smooth or silky. So in that one paragraph, we get a lot of information. All right. Second one, we got the giver. All right. Look at this. It was almost December. Boom. We get a month. And Jonas was beginning to be frightened. All right. We're in third person. No, wrong word, Jonas thought. Frightened meant that deep, sickening feeling of something terrible about to happen. There's that feeling. So right away, boom, we are sickening and frightened. We got those words in there. Frightened was the way he had felt a year ago when the unidentified aircraft had overflown the community twice. He had seen it both times. Squinting toward the sky, he had seen the sleek jet, almost a blur at its high speed, go past, and a second later, heard the blast of sound that followed. Then one more time, a moment later, from the opposite direction, the same plane. Okay, where are we? Don't know, but I know this. There's jets, there's sky, and there's a kid named Jonah, and it's December. So they're humans. I know that I'm somewhere where there's, like a person will look up at a sky. So that means there's sun. He said squint. So this feels like humankind. This feels like Earth. Is it? I don't know yet, but I'm on my way. So the thing about that is that's all, again, this, right? Who, what, where, and when. And the more that you put there and the more you do it through sight and sound, the better your setting is. So last thing I'm going to talk about is adding mood. So here's the thing. You can do kind of two ways, right? So let's go back to monsters. And we got Charlie sat across from Les's house, suspicious and frightened. That's true. I could have written that. It's true. It's not that interesting. A good writer would really take and throw words of mood in there, right? There's no mood setting. We don't know if he's happy, it's dark, if it's depressing, if it's scary. It says suspicious and frightened. But a mood writer would do this with looks, with appearance. Charlie sat in a chair set off by itself in the street under a streetlight that had long ago gone dark. He's sitting by himself. The light has gone dark. It's burned out. That's not awesome. Neighbors shifted their weight uneasily around him like nervous satellites. So all around him, people are nervous. Candlelights dotted the darkness like cat eyes peering from a cave. That's not an awesome image. So that must mean that this is a really nervous time. Same thing with sound. Charlie sat across from Les's house, suspicious and frightened. The narrator could tell us that, but it's better if they show us this through sound. Panicked whispers and shattered the silence, not just you could hear them. All around Charlie as he sat glaring at Les's house. Glaring. You don't glare unless you're upset. Scrapes and scratches of neighbors' nervous shuffling, right? You hear that scraping. That means they're on the street. So even the sound tells us where we are. There was no wind or breeze to rustle leaves. We're nowhere there are trees. Now the trees are there, but there's nothing there. So by telling you there's no rustling, we now know there are trees. So this is what you do. So today, here's your work. You're going to be here. This is your basic document that Mrs. Erickson told you about. You're here in this first box. In English, says use the information learned from global. So you're doing some research on your country. I'm going to click on setting, and here's what you're going to do. You're going to make some decisions today. So we want you to fill this out right here. All right. Name of the country you selected. You should have that. Easy. Then you're going to choose what kind of a setting. So is it in the city? Is it in the country? Is it in the suburbs like Apple Valley? Is it just a neighborhood? What kind of neighborhood? Then you want to do a little bit more description there. All right. Is it past, present, or future? Right? You got to do some describing, and you get to just riff, just have some fun with this. All right, here's an interesting one. Medical technology or time travel or weapons. Okay, so we got to have science. This is science fiction. Your story has to revolve around some sort of a pandemic, some sort of disease. Okay, so is it going to be medical technology that is like going to be in the story? Are people going to magically find these resources that save everyone? Is it going to be time travel? Is this how the problem's going to be solved, where someone goes back in time? Or is this going to turn into like a warfare? Is this like The Walking Dead, where whoever's got the weapons has the power? And what kind of a weapon? Some sort of super sci-fi weapon. So technology's got to be in here. It's got to be partly unrealistic. You've got to push that because it's got to be science fiction. And lastly, you got to choose your first or third person. Okay, there you go. That's a lot of information. Please make sure, hopefully, if you've watched this to the end, here's what I want to prove this. I want you to come up to me and tell me that you gave a nasty look to Mr. Bronson. So anyone who does that will have watched this to the end. That means I know that you did the work you're supposed to. All right, cool. Let's get your work done. Let's go.